Today, we are going to look at the massively popular TV adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle's famous Sherlock Holmes. No, not that one. The good one. Yes, that one. Elementary premiered on CBS on September 27th, 2012, starring Johnny Lee Miller as recovering drug addict Sherlock Holmes, with Lucy Liu as ex-surgeon, now sober companion, soon-to-be detective in training Joan Watson. We are currently in Season 5, and I have to be honest, friends, I adore this show. This video isn't here to compare Elementary to BBC Sherlock, despite that joke right at the beginning. BBC Sherlock is Elementary's flashy British older cousin who only shows up to family gatherings once every 2 or 3 years and then disappears back into the void. So, no. Partly because any real comparison between these two shows has the potential to bring out the unpleasant side of the internet, but mostly because having to spend any amount of time with Moffat's writing is not something I want to do. So yes, we are just looking at Elementary today. Elementary is back on TV, so I've been thinking about it a lot. It's so common to update and adapt the Sherlock Holmes mythos in our media, from BBC miniseries to Hollywood blockbusters to Disney films about mice to anime about dogs, that for an adaptation to be truly good, it must first set itself apart. It has to differentiate itself while still maintaining the mental and emotional core true to the original series in meaningful ways. You can't just grab a British guy in a silly hat and send him out to solve crimes if you want to make waves anymore. And honestly, there's just so much about Elementary that we could talk about. We could talk about Joan, about how Lucy Liu's rendition of Watson is one of the most unique in a plethora of Sherlock adaptations. We could talk about how Joan is a genuine, interesting character who stands as Holmes's equal, not as just a fan, who dresses like a goddess and needs more of her own storylines, damn it, because she's just so great. We could also talk about Mrs. Hudson and how really cool it is to have a trans character on the show, played by a trans woman, and how her storylines are sincere and interesting, and I'd really like more of her too, please. We could talk about how the show has handled all of the Sherlock Holmes essentials, Irene Adler and Moriarty and Mrs. Hudson and Lestrange and Mycroft, with such a fresh and unique twist, how they've avoided lazy or obvious routes with each and every one of them. We could talk about how the New York portrayed in Elementary is so much more accurately diverse than most popular movies would have you believe. We could talk about how the show takes time and care portraying addiction and recovery, which a lot of TV shows don't do. We could talk about how it's a show that cares more about why Sherlock and Watson want to solve a case instead of how they do it, because the show cares about human relationships and emotional growth. But today, what I really want to focus on is the factor that I think, for most people, really sets Elementary a cut above, and that is the character of Sherlock Holmes himself, and how, in Elementary, he is able to embody so well two normally contrary traits: intense antisocialness and extreme empathy for others. But first, some backstory. Sherlock Holmes, as a character, first appeared in the world in the 1887 publication of A Study in Scarlet. If you've never read this story, it's an odd ride. It's in the public domain, so you can find it pretty easily online. There's a murder and some flashbacks and evil Mormons. Lots of evil Mormons. Doyle apparently really disliked them. And from then on, it was one adventure after another, eventually accumulating 4 novels and 56 short stories into the canon. Sherlock Holmes in the books is a master of not only detective work, but also a master of disguise, excellent at fencing and single-stick and boxing. He raises bees, he plays violin, and he does a lot of cocaine. So there's a lot of content to draw on when people want to adapt Sherlock Holmes. And oh boy, have people adapted Sherlock Holmes. The Guinness Book of World Records has him listed as the most portrayed movie character, with more than 70 actors playing the part in over 200 films. There have been comic books and Star Trek episodes of Sherlock Holmes. He's been sent into the future, he's been reimagined as a doctor, as a mouse, and as a dog. Sherlock Hound, by the way, is an anime series that was co-directed with Hayao Miyazaki, so that's pretty great. And how Sherlock has been played has varied from time to time. Our most canonical classic vision of Sherlock Holmes has mostly been formed by Basil Rathbone. He wears a deerstalker hat, he smokes a calabash pipe, he's in dozens of films. By the way, both the hat and the pipe were never actually seen in the Sherlock Holmes books or short stories, but rather they were pulled from the 1899 stage version. They were chosen because they look good on stage, and the movies just kind of went with it. Most of these earlier portrayals see Holmes as a rather stoic, upper-crust British gentleman who solves the most grisly murders at a glance and makes it home in time for tea. Modern adaptations have tried to modernize and liven up the character, making him a mad genius or a calculating human robot. But not Elementary. Elementary, better than most adaptations, taps into something within the Holmes character that I think most miss. There will be spoilers from this point on, by the way, so fair warning. Elementary Sherlock has all the bells and whistles of a modern Sherlock adaptation. He's super deductive, he raises bees, he has a drug problem. He's got the brother and the single stick and the network of homeless as informants. Many, though not all of the episodes, pull plots straight from the short stories. And yes, Sherlock is an anti-social asshole. He says things with no regard for people's comfort. He does things without regard for people's boundaries. He's blunt and coarse with his words. Abrasive would be an understatement. He leaves weird experiments in the fridge. He plays loud music at all hours of the night. He's the worst kind of housemate. When Marcus Bell is relegated to desk work after being shot, he goes through a slew of detectives who aren't up to his standards, annoying and insulting them relentlessly. He avoids parties and social gatherings, and initially is completely unwilling to open up at any of his group meetings. And yet, is Sherlock Holmes empathetic? Empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share the emotions of others. People who are empathetic often act on this empathy with kindness or compassion. So does asshole Elementary Sherlock do this? Well, yes, and often. In the pilot, Sherlock gets so angry he attacks a doctor who has deliberately taken advantage of a mentally ill man, because how could he? Sherlock feels such a deep anger towards this man, I would argue because he feels a deep sense of empathy for his victim. He knows what it's like to lose control because of mental illness and addiction problems, and to be at the mercy of healthcare professionals. So to see a man who has been so exploited by his doctor is infuriating for Sherlock. In episode 2, Sherlock pulls aside a man they had been questioning because, with all of his observation, he can see how this man is struggling with addiction horribly. Not to chastise him, but to tell him to get help, to recommend rehab for him. Because how can he watch someone suffer in the same way he had suffered? In episode 3, Sherlock looks at a boy that he knows has been abused and in all sincerity says, "Victims of horrific abuse are often protective of their abusers, but that doesn't mean that we should send them back for seconds." And we can argue that Sherlock was emotionally abused in some way by his father, and that he was emotionally abused by Moriarty, so he feels empathy for this abused boy in this moment. In episode 19, Snow Angels, he gives a homeless man a wad of money and tells him to find someplace warm to stay before the blizzard comes in. Not related to a case, not for a goal, just because he can't walk past and do nothing. In episode 7, he rescues and comforts a woman who had been held captive in a basement. He stops everything, all investigation, all observation, until he knows that she is okay and can calm down. In episode 9, he sits with Joan in the clinic where she hopes her ex will come to get treatment. Waiting with her in this silent, almost vigil, he offers her this unspoken comfort. In the season 1 finale, Sherlock is willing to throw away everything to run away with Irene before he discovers her true identity. And in the season 2 finale, he helps Moriarty save her daughter, despite all of the pain that she had caused him in the past. Later, he takes on Kitty Winter, not because she shows any particular promise as a detective, but because he sees how hurt she is, how damaged, and wants to give her some chance to recover, an outlet for her anger and her fear. And when she goes beyond the law to get her revenge on the man who hurt her, Sherlock helps get her out of the country. Sherlock knows what it's like to go beyond the law whenever it comes to avenging the person you love. He did the same to M when he still thought that Moriarty had killed Irene. In the most recent season, Sherlock has deliberately tampered with evidence to protect Shinwell from going back to prison. He wants to give Shinwell this second chance at life and offers to train him to be a better informant to keep him safe. Sherlock notices and cares about Gregson's divorce, about Joan's boyfriends, about Marcus's mother and brother. He notices when Eugene, the medical examiner, develops a drug addiction after the woman he loved died. Sherlock cares. He steps in. Even if it means intruding into these personal matters where he's not invited, he notices and he steps in again and again, even if it makes him and everyone else uncomfortable. Sherlock can work the most gruesome murder case with calculating patience. He can wade through cold cases decades old for fun. But when, as was the case in one of the most recent episodes, Season 5, Episode 11, he knows that a person's life is in danger right now, that his action or inaction could save or condemn a human life, his work becomes more frantic than ever. There's so many examples, we don't even have time to go into them all. And I think that's an aspect of Sherlock Holmes that a lot of people overlook in their adaptations. Sherlock Holmes is no crime-solving robot, though Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century does have a Watson robot, so that's a whole nother thing. Sherlock Holmes is a deeply empathetic person. He isn't always the most emotionally open person, but he sees people's struggles. He cares deeply, and when he can, he reaches out to help. His empathy isn't reserved for those who are close to him, like those people who have somehow earned his notice are the ones he can empathize with. He extends this empathy to strangers and acquaintances alike, even if he struggles to express it in the most charming of ways. And what makes all of this work is that while being empathetic, while acting out of love and concern, this never absolves him of being an asshole. If he hurts people or oversteps boundaries, he doesn't get away with it, especially not with Watson. She holds him accountable. He has to grow as a person, learning to channel this empathy and his concern in more helpful and healthy ways. You don't get to hurt people just because you're doing it out of love. Elementary certainly has its own problems, both as an adaptation and as just a show. It has highs and lows, like any long-running show will. And I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of long-running American TV shows. They are, by their nature, often fairly episodic, and they cater to as wide an audience as possible. I don't have cable, and I find it very hard to commit to a show week after week and season after season. But Elementary has kept me coming back all this time, and the way it handles emotions and human empathy with this kind of dignity and respect is no small part of that. So thank you everyone for watching this video. This channel is still really new, so all the comments and likes are really appreciated. Did I talk about your favorite Sherlock moment? Did I totally forget a really good one? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed listening to this queer millennial feminist ramble about things I like for a while, feel free to subscribe.